Hi, my name's Ian Wallace. I call myself the Messed Up Counsellor, which is quite an intriguing name. And the podcast you're about to see is one of many, and we've been doing about a year now. So you can look back and see all the things we've talked about with guests and on my own over the process. A lot of the information I use in the podcast initially came from the first book I wrote in 2011. Why do we do that? What do we do about it? And that came out and was the basis of all my learning, understanding at that time, which is going back a few years now. And that process of understanding how the world works for people, how we can alter, change, and adapt it, was kind of what it was there to do with the initial stages. I've made that now an audiobook as well, so it's available on Amazon as an audio file that you can check out and you can download to your heart's content, and hopefully that will be helpful. In the podcasts, we're trying to look at all sorts of things about human interactions, human dynamics, the world, and how we might understand it more or change it more. So it gives you lots of ideas and tools in order to think about and look at different ways of being or dealing with things. And hopefully that brings people together and makes people more able to connect and communicate. Lots of topics. If you ever want to connect to me, just obviously drop me a comment on the podcast and I shall try as much as possible to reply. And if you've got any ideas of things that we might want to use on the podcasts, then please let me know. My name's Ian Wallace. Thanks for looking and thanks for listening. Hi, my name's Ian Wallace, the Messed Up Counsellor. Today's podcast is something that people do without realising to a lesser or greater degree. I mean, the ones that kind of come to mind when you see them are the ones that you see on the news and the documentaries. And that's what people call hoarding. So hoarding is collecting, basically. And we collect all sorts of things when we're hoarding. And we will do it because we're interested in it, initially, maybe. So, the people who will have, every magazine every week for the last 50 years on a pile. Now, they may have read all those magazines, obviously, but then the magazines start becoming not on a pile at this side of the chair, but then they become a pile on that side of the chair, and then they become a pile in front of the chair, and then they go from room to build and build and build and build. And the ones you see on the documentaries is there's a very narrow escape route. That's kind of like a little window and people crawl through it to get out, Now, that's obviously a lot more intense than what a lot of us do. And we all do this to a certain degree, to a lesser or greater extent. So the ones you'll see on the documentaries where people have this little hatch and they crawl through it to get in and out. The process of that is usually around a feeling or a situation scenario where they want to block the world out. They want to disconnect from the world. They want to create an isolation process for whatever reason. And what they're doing with the hoarding and keeping things is they're slowly building the walls up in front of them and around them to keep them safe. Now, initially, that is not a big deal usually. I've got a pile of stuff at the side of my table at home. So that's not necessarily going to stop me getting connected to the world. But for some people, not everybody, for some people, they have to have the next, the more. And that builds up to these kind of situations. And there's programs on the reality TV programs where you'll see that. I think there's one that I've not really seen, but it takes somebody into a warehouse and they take all their stuff out of the house and they put it on the floor in the warehouse, and there's masses of it. So when we're doing that hoarding, when we're doing that process, we initially do it because we're interested in whatever it is. So it could be a magazine, it could be a piece of clothing, it could be cups, it could be anything. at all. And sometimes it transgresses into other things. So we might start building that, which is magazines, and then we might go on to clothes, and then we might not. We might go on to buy tins of beans or whatever, and it'll kind of transgress over those processes sometimes. So what we need to understand with that is that it's a way of keeping us safe. Now that sounds a bit mad, really, doesn't it? So if we are feeling as though the world doesn't like us, say we've gone through 2 or 3 scenarios where people have not been nice with us, people have not been good to us, and then we will naturally feel as though we want to kind of build this wall, this barrier, this process. And that insecurity in that process, or that process of being emotionally or mentally targeted, can mean that we isolate ourselves, we go back behind our door, we go back into our room, we go back into a chair, we go back into a bed, for example. And we've got lots of ways of doing that, because society gives us lots of ways of doing that. So you'll know when you're in a situation whereby it's not helpful. Yeah, now buying things is not a bad thing to do. Obviously we buy things all day. But if you're buying things and not getting pleasure from it, so I'll give you an example of that. You might have somebody who likes tech, likes phones, for example. And so every time there's a new iPhone or a new Android phone or whatever, they buy a brand new phone. Now, they don't need a brand new phone because their phone's working, okay? But they need to buy it. And that buying that item doesn't then give them pleasure. So they buy it and they leave it in a box. Or they buy it and they don't get it out of the box. So they've bought it, they've paid money for it, but they're not actually going to use it. Now, people will do that with clothes. They'll have clothes in the wardrobe which have never been worn. They might be the wrong size for the person, you know. So we build that comfort, we build that process in having things around us that we're not necessarily going to use or not going to necessarily something we need, yeah. And that's an interesting concept. So if I have something I need, then I'm out of control, it's in control. And it sounds a bit mad, doesn't it? If I have something I want, then that's a different drive for me. So if I need something, I've got to have it, I'm out of control. Without it, my life will not survive. Without it, my life will not be complete. Without it, my life will not be okay. Yeah. That need process is a way for me to understand, is this out of control or is this in control? If I want something, then I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to get pleasure out of it. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to work with it. I'm going to do something with it. I'm going to wear it. Whatever it is, it's going to give me pleasure. A need usually doesn't. And that's, in my head, that's a good way for understanding whether or not this is something that's okay or something that's not okay. Yeah. So as I'm working that process with people, then we have to understand their particular drive, their particular focus on it. And you'll find that sometimes with addictive processes. Yeah. I need to have a drink. I need to place a bet. I need the drugs, whatever. That addiction process has an element of this, I think. Although I'm not an addiction specialist, I would never profess to be one. But I do work with people who have those kind of ideas and views and lives. So for me, those have some similarities. They're not the same. They're not the same. But they have that need and want. And I think that's where we're either in control with the want or out of control with the need. So what stimulates that need to hoard, that need to buy? What is the drive that's making us do it? For me, that drive is usually some kind of insecurity, which can come in many forms, obviously. But the insecurity, the kind of need to be safe, need to be in control, those kind of drives create this hoarding, this buying process. If we can start looking at that out of control process being the drive, and we can then see where that has originated from, because it doesn't start on day one. You're fully into that process. You can do that. It'll be a build-up, and sometimes very slow build-up, to be fair. It's sometimes one that we wouldn't recognise, you know. But if we can see that in ourselves, so I have, personally, I have a drive, a need that if I'm feeling out of control, if I'm feeling not connected to the world, if I'm feeling like the world's not good, and it's not working the way I want it to work, what I will do is what a lot of people will do, is I will put things straight. So I will look at my coasters, which usually are square, pictures on the wall, things that have straight lines, and I will reorganize them to be straight. So I know this about myself. This is not something I have just found out. I learned this many years ago. So if I see myself putting that coaster straight on line with the edge of a table or the edge of a surface or with a line on the surface, then I instinctively know there's something in my world, my life, that's not actually working well. I'm feeling out of control. I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling upset, feeling out of sorts, whatever you want to call that. So that for me is a trigger now. So if I find myself doing that, I do it because that's a reaction kind of process. I recognise I've done it. And then what I do is I undo it. I move it away from the line. I put it at an angle. Now, that frustrates me enormously, I need to say, and it makes me very upset, and I'm inside going, hey, it's not straight kind of a process. But what it's doing for me is it's giving me that way of understanding there's something in my world and my life that has not worked well or is not working well. So it might be I'm working too hard. It might be there's some other pressure. You know, I've got a bill to pay. It might be that there's a relationship around me that's not working well. It might be a whole range of things that drive that. But I've now recognised that. So I use it as a tool. I use it as a way of exploring and being aware of my world, yeah? But because I move it so it's not straight anymore, that does my head in, as I've said. But it means I'm now in control of that coaster. I'm now in control of that world. I've recognised it. I've seen it. I'm not going to pamper to it. Doesn't need to be straight. Doesn't need to be straight for the world to be okay. It can be at an angle and the world can still be okay. Nothing's going to collapse if it's at an angle. But I'm now in control of that coaster. I'm now in control of that feeling, emotion. And I'm going to do something with it. I'm going to find out what it is that I'm stressed about or anxious about or all those kind of things. And I'm going to remove it, hopefully. But it's given me a way of indicating. Now, everybody's situation, I mean, that's a common one. I see that an awful lot where people put things straight, pictures are straight and stuff. So it's not an unusual one for me to have, yeah? But I'm now learning, or I have learned over the years, that process is just an indicator. It doesn't have to control my life. Now, if I didn't do that, if I kept it straight, then what might happen is that I would then go to pictures. And I'd start straightening all the pictures. And then I'd start straightening all the forks in the drawer. And I'd start straightening all the cups. And I'd start straightening all the tins. And I'd put the tins the right way around. And I'd start increasing that process. And that then would make my world a lot harder sometimes, because I might spend hours putting the tins right, or putting the plates right, or putting the coasters right, or I might have to put the magazines right in the shops as I work and go outside. And I see that an awful lot. I used to work in greeting cards, so I'd go into greeting card displays and I would put things right, and I'm not being paid. I'm in WH Smith's or some other shop, and I'm thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this on this counter, on this surface? What is going on? So these are the things I find out about myself. These are the things I know I'm doing it. But my point is that if I don't take hold of the coaster, then it will multiply, it will grow, it will become more and more and more. And that's the hoarding bit. It doesn't start with a house full of stuff. It doesn't. It builds up over years sometimes years and years and years. But it will slowly restrict me. It will slowly make my world something that I can't just go and do something, because I would then have to go in the shop. I would have to do the cards. I would have to clean up. I would have to tidy up. I would have to do all these things, because it's like the spinning plates on, the kind of like thing where you have the sticks and the spinning plates. And the more you get one plate spinning round and being okay, then another one's wobbling and you have to do that one, and another one's wobbling, you have to do that one. And eventually all you're doing is running around doing these plates. Same kind of process. So now I know this about myself, and it's a good idea if you can understand your own processes. Because when you see yourself doing it, when you notice it, then you can do something with it. When you don't notice it, you can't do it. I didn't notice these things straight off. I didn't just become aware of these things. It was something I started finding out about myself when I did more internal work and more reflection work and more understanding of the drives and the things that I do in my world, in my life. So I use that now to help other people, because these are common things that we all do to a lesser or greater degree. But in doing that, then what happens if a plate falls down, really? Falls off. Okay, got one less plate to spin. I'm taking control of my world. And eventually, all the plates can fall off. It won't stop the world. It won't kill me. But in some senses, I think that. When I first started being reflective of this stuff, and that need to, have to, was starting to really upset my world. Can you imagine going into a shop with greeting card displays and there's people moving them around all the time? We're not putting them back straight, not putting them back in the right order. And that would eventually have meant that I would have stayed in the shop all day, constantly going around and moving cards. That wouldn't have given me a life. So if you understand your drives, if you understand your behavioural patterns, changing things, making them straight, in my situation, then I can start taking control. I can start working with the reasons for it, not the end result. So if you imagine the coaster just being one thing that, yes, I can control, I can put it at an angle. But then if I didn't do something with the reasons for that behavioural process, I may not be able to stop doing the picture, because it's just multiplying the process, basically. So if I do something with the feelings, emotions, the drives, the insecurity, whatever it is, the anxiety, the worry, whatever's going on for me in my world and my life, that is the origin. That is the process. If you have a headache, for example, you'll take a tablet, probably to get rid of the headache. But the body's giving you a headache to tell you there's something wrong. So if you have the headache, then you have to find out the reason for the headache. So my coaster, if you like, is the headache, Now I have to find the reason for the headache. If I find the reason for the headache, I no longer have the headache. Does that make sense? Hopefully it did. And as we move through that process of awareness, of understanding our worlds, understanding that process of collecting, and we all do it, as I've said, to a lesser or greater degree, then if we get pleasure from what we're doing, that's fantastic. Absolutely great. If we look at these things that we're collecting and we spend time with them and we get pleasure from them, if we just put them in on a shelf and never look at them again, I would suggest we need to look at our worlds emotionally and mentally and see what's going on, because that's the headache tablet. It's not the reason for the headache. It's a really interesting world when you look at things like this, and we counsellors, therapists, we kind of like delve into all these kind of places, which is why the world is really interesting. Why is 69 I keep doing this? Because I'm interested in it and it fascinates me. And as long as I'm interested in it, I'll keep on doing it. But at some point, I probably won't, because I'll be interested in something else, which will be okay. So from that point of view, delve into these things, start finding out why you do what you do, which is the title of the first book, because there is a reason for things. Sometimes it's a bit hard to understand. Sometimes you need help from people like myself to kind of pull it apart and see what's going on. But there is always a reason why we do what we do. Even if we don't understand it, there'll be a reason for it from somewhere. So understand your reasoning, understand why you're doing what you're doing. And then, hopefully, you can put in place some process like me. Find out why I'm putting that straight. Don't worry about putting it straight. Don't get hooked into, I'm doing that again. Move it out, make it not straight, obviously, and then do some work on the emotional and the mental processes happening around you, your world, your life, the stuff that really matters, My name's Ian Wallace. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. Hopefully it's made sense. If it did, great. If it didn't, I'm sorry. It should have done. But hopefully it did make sense. And enjoy it. Hopefully you enjoyed what I was talking about and it made you think. But like, subscribe and share, because that helps other people in this process. And this podcast hopefully will help somebody else in your friend list or your connections. Take care. My name's Ian Wallace, the Messed Up Counsellor. Hi, thanks for listening to the podcast, and hopefully it made sense and was interesting for you. Please subscribe, like and share. With the podcasts, you never know who will be helped by the things we talk about, things we share. We don't normally tell people our problems, but by sharing it and helping other people to understand things. The book Insecurity, It's All About Me, is also available now through Amazon, and it gives you an understanding of what drives insecurity, how insecurity works within our human dynamics, and how you can get a much more secure connection with people. It gives you lots of ideas and thoughts, which is really good. So thanks for listening. Subscribe, like, share, hit the button, and if you've got any comments, please give me them, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks very much. Take care.